No one watching right now. But today, I finally got unpenalized from ranked. I know I was being too toxic. Oh yeah, I start some ranked. And I might be getting a bundle.
Pigs for the dinner table. So this killing to them was no different, and they busied themselves collecting the bodies ready to be cleaned up and made into pies.
Mm-hmm.
Slaughtered. For she had raised them since they had been born more as pets, unlike others who simply saw them as yet another food source on the farm. Lizzie and her father had never been close, and she had always resented him for marrying a woman called Abby Gray a few years after her mother's death. Lizzie's relationship with her stepmother, Abby, had deteriorated.
Anyone got a mic?
When she had found out that her
I got my mic.
bought several properties in secret. What distressed Lizzie was that the benefactor was her stepmother at the expense of herself and her sister.
I can barely hear you.
Sister.
Okay, I can hear you.
My bitch like it. My bitch like it.
And that's me.
Lizzie was in the barn and heard a strange noise from the house. She rushed into the house and into the sitting room. What she saw was
My bitch like it.
was her father.
My bitch like it.
Disfigured as someone had struck him several times with a hatchet, killing him almost instantly. Lizzie then summoned the maid, Bridget Sullivan, but didn't let her go into the sitting room, feeling that the sight of her dead father would be too much for the young maid. Earlier, Lizzie's 64-year-old stepmother had told Bridget that she was out visiting a sick friend. She was found shortly after Mr. Morton's body was discovered. She was lying face down in the guest room upstairs. She had also been murdered, having been savagely hacked to death from behind with a hatchet. What was noticeable about her compared to her husband's was it had been much more violent and intense, as if the assailant had hated the victim, something that was later brought up at the murder trial. And the hatchet, thought to have been used to kill both victims, may have in fact been the same one used by Lizzie's father to kill her much-beloved pigeons a few months earlier. The police investigated and put together the following timeline. The timing of the deaths were most odd. The medical examiner concluded that the stepmother was killed from behind at around 9 a.m. while cleaning the guest room floor. But the father was not killed until about 8 a.m. He had arrived home at approximately 10:45 a.m. unexpectedly, having been out on business most of the morning. He had then gone into the sitting room to take a nap. Lizzie discovered her father at 11:10 a.m. It did strike the police as strange that in such a small three-story house, nothing untoward was seen or heard as going on by either Lizzie or the maid the whole morning. Yet two people who had been brutally murdered went unnoticed by the pair of them.
Your drone has found a bomb.
For
10
this
seconds
was that she
before
had spent the
insertion.
entire night cleaning the outside of the house on the instructions of
5
the
seconds to
stepmother,
go.
Mrs. Borden. She was then resting from her duties in the third-floor room.
You found a bomb. Make your way to its location and
She
defuse
was in
it.
the barn searching for lead sinkers for an upcoming fishing excursion. The police did carry out a search of the house, but later admitted that it was only a cursory inspection. They did not carry out a thorough search until 2 days later, on August 6th. At the inquest into the deaths, the medical examiner noted Mr. Borden had been killed by being struck at least 9 times with a hatchet, one blow slicing through his stepmother had been killed by solid evidence that Lizzie committed the murders, and to the community she had a spotless character, teaching Sunday school. Lizzie was also the treasurer and secretary of the local branch of the Christian Endeavor Society, which helped to promote the society's message of leading an earnest Christian life among its members. So with her being so highly respected, Lizzie never left Fall River. Her sister moved into a modern house above the neighborhood of The Hill. She died 35 years later of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927. Her younger sister, Emma, died a few days later of a kidney disease. Neither ever married. The press and investigators never stopped hounding Lizzie. Most were convinced that she had carried out the murders. No one else was ever tried for the crime, and to this day, it's officially seen as an unsolved case. So who did murder Andrew and Abby Borden on that fateful morning in 1892? The suspects are as follows. Older daughter, Emma Borden. At 36 years old, and a spinster, Emma was unlikely to find a husband in an era where women were normally married off by their early 20s. Could it be that she was fearful of her stepmother inheriting everything if her father died? Meaning she faced an old age of abject poverty as she had neither a profession nor a husband to support her? So maybe she had a possible motive. At the time of the murder, she had an alibi. She was visiting friends 15 miles away. Also, her character was seen as impeccable. The resentful 25-year-old maid from Iowa, Bridget Sullivan.
Drone has located a bomb.
Abby Borden was very strict. Some would say she was mean when it came to how she treated her maid.
You've located a bomb. Make your way to its location and defuse it.
Outside of the house thoroughly, despite the maid's protest that she was ill and it was in the middle of a particularly bad heat wave. Could it be she simply snapped and brutally killed Abby in a rage and later the father in order to cover up her crime? The highly respectable 32-year-old younger daughter, Lizzie Borden. Did the police get right in the first place? Didn't have enough evidence to prove it was her. It is true Lizzie had much to gain from the death of her father and stepmother. For if her elderly father died, her stepmother was due to inherit his vast fortune and Abby had many relatives. On top of this, Andrew Borden, despite his wealth, was a the Borden house lacked indoor plumbing and electricity, while Andrew's cousins lived on The Hill, a neighborhood for the wealthy which he could easily afford to live. Could it be that Lizzie feared she would never get her hands on what was rightfully hers? She felt it was possible to live on The Hill. Murders, did she change out of a blood-stained dress twice? Or did she walk around for 2 hours in a blood-stained dress, which seems to be
Down to one friend. You have dropped the diffuser.
But the fact of the matter was that the police didn't search the house properly for evidence until 2 days later, giving Lizzie plenty of time to get any incriminating evidence. It is true that Lizzie was found in the kitchen by her sister and family friend burning what Lizzie claimed to be an old paint-stained dress. This may seem incriminating, but we must bear in mind that this was the morning of August 7th, the day after the house had been thoroughly searched by the police for evidence. Could it be that Lizzie's explanation regarding burning the dress was the correct one? And as for her shambolic and contradictory statements at court, can it be simply due to the side effects of morphine she had been prescribed by her doctor at the time for stress and anxiety? There is another theory it might have been manslaughter from diminished responsibility. As Lizzie's mother had suffered from seizures that made her violent and go into uncontrollable rages, which she had no recollection of afterwards. It is said that Lizzie suffered from this too, but it's hardly possible that if this was true, she had an episode that lasted 2 hours. Could be a relative. And there was the strange case of Lizzie's maternal 59-year-old uncle, Mr. John Vinicum Morse. The night before the murders, he had arrived unexpectedly with no luggage at the Borden's house. This was unusual as he
There's a cat in the
to
freezer.
discuss business with his brother-in-law, Andrew.
10 seconds remaining.
It is said that despite the heat, he would wear the same clothes for 2 days at a time. after the murders had been committed. The police
He's probably
considered him a
diffusing.
suspect for a while, as his alibi at the time of the murders seemed just too perfectly detailed and rehearsed. Also, it didn't help that he once trained as a butcher and seemed quite emotionally unaffected by the murders. But the police concluded that he was just very eccentric and cold-hearted. That his
Do they not know how to defuse? What the hell?
Hello?
Hi. Did they not know how to defuse?
Something from my own imagination and pit that against someone else in a competitive way. 4 ways to play. That's what I want. What is my opponent going to do? How am I going to counterplay that?
There's just always a different outcome.
His alibi, being several miles away at the time of the murders, checked out. The police dismissed him as a possible suspect and other suspects. Was it a murderous intruder? Vaughn was secluded and the family were well known to be rich, so an opportunist thief was not too far-fetched a notion. Murdering one of the residences in the area might make sense if the thief had been discovered. But for the murderous thief to hide away for 2 hours, then kill her attorney husband, not the 2 other women in the house, does seem far-fetched. Even so, it was known that Andrew Boardman was quite an unpopular man in town and had made many enemies in his business dealings. Was it a serial killer? 5 days before the trial, a local woman was hacked to death with a hatchet in her kitchen by a Portuguese immigrant named Jose Correa de Mello. She had been struck 23 times to the head. Jose was later convicted of the woman's murder. Prosecution believed it was a burglary gone wrong. It must have seemed strange to have 2 murders so close together in such a small town. Nobody thought there was a link between the 2 cases, despite the murder sharing similarities such as being committed in broad daylight and the murderer entering and leaving the scene. It is worth noting that official records didn't come to America until Gordons were murdered.
Oh, come on.
It was a combination of people. Could it be that Lizzie had an accomplice? Could her accomplice have been the maid? And could they have carried out the murder together with Lizzie paying her off with her inheritance? It is true that Bridget left the family employment shortly after the murders, but accounts differ regarding what happened to her next. Some say she found employment elsewhere and eventually married, while another more tantalizing account was that she suddenly and mysteriously came into a large amount of money and was never to be heard of again. An intriguing combination of people and events. Could it be that Abby was killed by an intruder or serial killer, then fled or left the scene, whereupon Lizzie, seizing the opportunity, murdered her father, later hoping to blame it all on the other murderer? It might seem far-fetched, but maybe Lizzie was desperate enough to carry out such a foolish plan. Again,
Oh, nice.
The case remains nearly 130 years later unsolved. At the time of the trial, public opinion was that Lizzie was innocent. Soon enough, the public turned against her, and this can be best summed up by a popular children's series. Lizzie Boardman took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Sorry.
British, the grim realities were never that far away. February 8, 1942, the shocking news came that the mighty British force of Singapore was under attack by the Japanese, but also on that day was much nearer to home. In an air raid shelter in central London, it appeared that she had been strangled to death. The grim likely culprit was a German British citizen. Thus started the week-long reign of terror of the Blackout River.
Why?
Day 1, Sunday, February 8th, 1942.
Oh. Okay, so.
Evelyn Hamilton. Location, air raid shelter near
I thought you were the one
March
who
in
shot
London.
me too.
Age, 40 years old. Occupation, pharmacist. Evelyn Hamilton was last seen
One
that
friendly
day.
remaining.
She had left her boarding house to get a late supper. Her body was discovered the next morning in an air raid shelter. She had been strangled to death, and her handbag had been stolen. Day 2, Monday, February 9th, 1942. Victim, Evelyn Oatley, also known as Ida Ward. Location, in the victim's flat at Wardour Street in Soho, London. Age, 35 years old. Occupation, part-time actress and prostitute. On the day soap rationing was finally introduced in Great Britain, a woman was discovered dead in her flat in Soho, central London. In some ways, her murder did not surprise the police as the victim, as Ida was a well-known prostitute. But what was shocking was the savagery of her death. She had been strangled with her throat slit. Her body had been horribly mutilated with a number of items: a razor blade, a can opener, and hair tongs. But the police did find one important clue, and that was from the clumsily discarded can opener. On it were fingerprints, but frustratingly it matched none of the police's criminal databases, though helpfully it suggested the murderer was left-handed. The second murder was only a 30-minute walk away from the previous day's murder, and strangulation had been the cause of death in both cases. But what really worried the police was the second murder was so much more violent than the first. Day 3, Tuesday, February 10, 1942. Victim, Margaret Florence Lowe, also known as Pearl. Location, in the victim's flat at Gosfield Street, Marylebone. Age, 43 years old. Occupation, prostitute. On Tuesday, February 10th, the day started with good news that the American allies, who had been in the war less than 2 months, had sunk the Japanese destroyer, the Natsushio. But for the
By the way, stream, I'm sorry if I don't talk much. I'm eating and watching a
trying to solve the murder of the two
YouTube video.
unaware there had been another murder.
And also, I'm trying to concentrate on the game unless there's other people with
The
mics.
body was not discovered until 3 days later, on Friday the 13th. It had been another prostitute, a 43-year-old known as Pearl, who had been butchered in her flat. She had been strangled, but with a silk stocking or scarf, and her body had been horribly mutilated with a knife, a razor blade, and a candle.
Cuphead will, part 2 will come out later today.
Day 4, Wednesday, February 11th, 1942. Victim, Doris Ioane, also known as Doris Robson. Location, in the victim's flat at Sussex Garden in Paddington. Age, 32 years old. Occupation, prostitute and housewife. The next day, the police no longer had any doubt they had a serial killer on their hands, for in a ground floor flat they discovered 32-year-old Doris Ioane. Like the other women, she had been strangled and her body left horribly mutilated. By now, both the police and newspapers started to realize the 4 murders were linked.
Ow.
British newspapers dubbed the killer the Blackout Ripper and started to draw parallels with the famous Victorian serial killer, Jack the Ripper. Day 5, Thursday, February 12, 1942. Then there was a lull, just as the press
God.
was whipping the British public
Gonna
into
be
a
mute.
frenzy. All went quiet.
Wait.
Had the killer learned to cover his tracks better? Day 6, February 13, 1942. Victim, Greta Hayward. Piccadilly Circus, London. Age, 2 years old. Occupation, unknown. That evening, a young
Mark, I need water.
Hayward was waiting for her boyfriend at Piccadilly
My
Circus in central London.
Oh, I can't
Shut up.
And started to chat with her.
Hmm?
She explained that she was not that kind of girl.
Mark it.
He attacked her. Nearby, he started to strangle her. The attack was passing, forcing the attacker to flee. Victim,
Muted.
also known as Kathleen King. Location, near Paddington train
Two people
station.
muted. CDN and Yellow.
Prostitute.
Turret.
Later that evening, a minor assault broke out at Paddington railway station. A prostitute noticed Kathleen was entertaining a young man. Suddenly, the man turned violent and attempted to strangle her, but Kathleen managed to fight him off and scream for help. The man then fled in a panic, and in a clumsy attempt to try to buy her silence, he threw a 5-pound note at her. In all these incidents and murders, there was a distinct modus operandi, so the police thought they were all being done by the same man. The attacks were all on women who were or might be prostitutes. They were all carried out in the evening or early hours. All took place in central London. Strangulation or attempted strangulations were used each time. Where there was an opportunity, the victims' bodies were horribly mutilated. So who was the assailant? Could it be that the murders were all related? Was an under-resourced London police force jumping to the conclusion that it was a serial killer's work as
could locate a
to
bomb.
investigate them as one case rather than individual ones? The London police force had lost many of its best men to the armed forces and was stretched thin from its civil defense duties. From 1939 to 1945, it rose by 50%, and an undermanned police force could not cope with the habitual looting and racketeering of the capital, as well as the social problems arising from desperate and homeless citizens. So it wasn't convenient to overlook the subtle differences between the cases. Like the Evelyn Hamilton case, Robert
10 seconds to go.
she was carrying around 80 pounds in cash, which would be worth about
5
27
seconds before
pounds today.
insertion.
This was because she was in the process of moving north for a new job.
You found a bomb.
The two
Make your way to
attacks
its
on the
location
night of
and
Friday
defuse
the 13th were clumsy. Could they have been the acts of an enraged drunk? A complicated relationship. Some of the victims had complicated relationships. Could they have been the cause of their demise? For instance, Evelyn Oakley had abandoned her Lancasterian poultry for her husband to head to London to pursue an acting career. And Dora Schumann double
What?
lives, both a housewife and secretly as a prostitute.
I'm not unmuting you if that's what you're asking.
Entertain men while he worked the night shift as a hotel
You're
manager.
lucky. I missed you on purpose. What?
This is not unheard of, for by midweek the murders were in all the newspapers. This is some maniac to carry out similar murders to satisfy his sick desires, or a cunning murder to settle a score made to look like a blackout to throw himself.
Great. You got me to 15 health.
The intensity and modus operandi would suggest so.
This CDN dude just kept shooting me in the torso and foot and got me down to 15 health.
Smith, the brides in the bath murders, 1912 to 1914.
So I TK'd him.
With all these
They look at circle.
put together, was. The scene of the attack, the attacker had left behind his gas mask case and shot away. The gas mask's case carried the identifying number 525987, and RAF records revealed that it belonged to 28-year-old officer cadet Gordon Frederick Cummings.
Why?
He was
It's an accident.
Oh yeah. Okay, sure.
Ghost my language.
It was discovered that he had no criminal record. He's happily married to a secretary and was doing well for himself in the
What?
RAF, having recently been promoted from leading aircraftman in a unit to an officer cadet training to fly submarines and firefighter aircraft.
Huh.
Police have been eliminated.
Soon, things
Bad
would
luck.
start to unravel for Cummins. Pieces would start to fall into place.
Bad luck.
I bet CDN's gonna TK me.
In fact, a womanizer, and he was left-handed. But there was also damning hard evidence.
Someone can kill Spider.
The police found a cigarette case in his uniform pocket belonging to one of the victims.
Why? What did I do?
Below.
Aish.
Search of his quarters, detectives found the
I killed CDN because
You
he
shoot
kept
me,
shooting
man.
me?
Dora Schumann.
No, you shoot me,
What
man.
sealed his fate beyond a doubt was his fingerprints on the can opener used to mutilate Evelyn Oakley's body.
I never shot you.
It took the jury just 35 minutes to find Cummins guilty. An appeal in early June 1942 was dismissed.
Mute.
1942. Cummins protested his innocence to the very last moment, and his wife stood by him until the end, believing he was innocent.
Insertion. 5 seconds to insertion. You must locate and defuse the bomb. You have dropped the diffuser. The diffuser is now secured. You have located the bomb.
This episode is brought to you by the last day on Earth, survival. Create your character and survive amongst a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland. Rebuild civilization and construct a sanctuary out of the rubble to protect yourself from the undead and crazy raiders. Collect resources and craft new weapons, armor, and traps, starting with weak spears that upgraded to automatic deploy and marching weapons. Big Dog Company. Description below and play now. Now, talking of survival in difficult situations, let's see how you survived the total prisons of Japan and escaped it into the freezing Hokkaido prefecture. The convict so soon.
Right. You had to walk in front of me.
Japan opened during the Meiji
Shut the fuck up, trash.
It's one of the
Bro, I literally just killed most of their team and you're calling me trash?
abolition of the death
Shut
penalty.
the fuck up, trash.
And you only have 1 kill, I have 3 and I'm trash?
Local lake freezing over, regularly engulfing the area.
Op 4 eliminated.
Its entire
Friendly
history,
mission
no
successful.
one has ever escaped. That is Yoshie Shiratori. He was born in 1907 in the
Nice kill,
Aomori
trash.
Prefecture, which is the northernmost part of the Tohoku region in the land of rising sun.
Report.
Shiratori was the product
What?
of a
You
broken
report
home
me?
and fell into a life of petty crime.
Don't,
at a young
please,
age.
don't.
He spent much of his adult life in prison. Between 1933 and 1947, he escaped from
I
prison
report
less
you
than
too,
4
bro.
times.
I reported the wrong dude. I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about CBN.
Aye. Yeah, I know.
1944.
My friend is working for Rainbow.
Japan. All its earlier territorial gains in the conflict
Mhm.
were rapidly being retaken by the Allies. To make matters
And you
worse,
took Buck.
Americans had just started its
Yeah,
strategic
shut the fuck
bombing
up.
of the Japanese
Go talk
mainland.
with your twin dad, bud.
Shiratori had ended up being transferred to
Shut the hell
as he
up.
had escaped from his 2 previous prisons.
You know I'm streaming, right?
Prison in his hometown, where he was imprisoned in 1933 on
I'm not
robbery and
streaming
murder charge.
anything.
Life inside Japanese
Ooh, voice abuse. Okay, yeah, there's something I can report you for.
solely on punishing prisoners and made no attempt at reforming them.
Bullying and
I got him.
harassing others.
Sadistic punishments by the guards for the smallest infractions.
AKA toxic behavior.
Shiratori quickly grew to hate the unfairness of the whole prison system.
Be advised your
Years
drone
later,
has located a
taken by
bomb.
stormy night,
You're probably gonna die in the first couple
picking the
seconds.
cell door
The
open,
end,
where
dude.
he had gotten off a wooden bucket.
I meant once we get in game. What's a lesion? Spin.
You've located a bomb. Make your way to its location.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment for escaping and stealing supplies from a hospital.
Another thing to report for.
During World War II, he was transferred
Griefing.
to Akita prison and placed in solitary confinement for extended periods.
Also, you're trash. You're using a freaking holographic over an ACOG.
Guards continued. Regular torture was so harsh, in fact, that in one instance he was nearly beaten to death by the guards. Shiratori kept it a secret that he could get out of his handcuffs and admit he was no longer in the space of solitary confinement. He noticed the vent in the ceiling was rotting away. Every night he
Police, now I can't be tuned anymore
a rotting wooden
unless it's by Shanny or Jimmy.
to the floor when the guards checked up on him. One night, using a storm to disguise the noise and after removing his handcuffs, he managed to escape by climbing up his tall cell wall one last time to lose the air vent.
Nice job of flashing yourself, dude.
Though within a few months, he was recaptured. He had gone to the home of a guard from the prison who
We don't care, shut the fuck up.
As punishment, he was transferred to the isolated prison in Abashiri, Hokkaido, up north of the country, where
Ha! You're
years
calling
of
me
life
nature.
imprisonment. The conditions of Hokkaido gave the prison a
Job
fearsome
done.
reputation. Even if an inmate
Job
escaped,
done.
he faced certain death due to its remote location, cold freezing temperatures,
So where is Cam?
and the difficulty in getting food and other resources. In the prison, convicts would sleep on an uncomfortable wooden bed and were awoken by the guards by a bang of a stick against the log pillow. In these
No,
extreme
personne.
conditions, the convicts in Abashiri prison were put on exhausting labor-intensive projects such as roadwork, construction, farming, and mining. In this situation, Sheridan placed in more sophisticated handcuffs made specially for him after his previous escape. The next 2 years must have gone by very slowly for Sheridan, especially as he knew if he didn't do something about it, he would be spending the rest of his life in prison. Then, the summer of 1944, this began. Strange. Placed in solitary confinement for his previous escape attempts, he was now being fed in his cell. Every morning, he would spit his prison
Good,
breakfast of
Jim.
miso soup all over the metal doorframe of his cell,
Gideon, I hope you
especially
die.
at the food tray slot in the door. He also dabbed some on his handcuffs.
You must
Perhaps
recover
this
the
odd
diffuser.
behavior went unnoticed
Have
by
you
the
in here?
prison guards. Or maybe they thought Shiratori did not care for the traditional miso soup of fermented
5 seconds
soybeans
left.
with salt and bonus.
Oh, GG.
Claimed by Shiratori, miso soup has a high concentration of salt in it. So as the weeks
Yo,
went
là,
by,
des
the
appointés,
salt
hein?
slowly weakened and corroded metal screws that were installed. Guards would bring his food tray every evening. Salt reacts violently with iron. This is because the combination breaks up the oxygen molecules, resulting in accelerated rusting, causing the iron to lose
J'ai pas de triangle
electrons and
encore, hein.
oxygen to gain electrons.
May I have Doxidian?
Night of August 26th,
No.
screws and bolts in his handcuffs and the door feeding slot to his cell had started to become warped. So Shiratori later that evening took advantage of the now strictly enforced blackout. He stripped down to his underwear and squeezed himself through the feeding slot, but he had to dislocate both shoulders to do so. He managed to stay on the run living in the wilderness and hunting for food for the next 2 years.
Op 4 located a bomb. Protect it.
Why? Ella is toxic.
5 seconds and counting.
He was now aware that the war was over and headed to Sapporo. Here he was recaptured after he had a scuffle with hostile actors and food, that ended with the man being stabbed and killed by Shiratori. Shiratori claimed it had been an accident and he had simply been trying to defend himself. But the court found him guilty of murder because the sentence was changed to the death penalty. This time, the Japanese authorities were taking no chances and sent him off to Sapporo High Security Prison.
Sapporo.
Awaiting execution.
Allez, voilà mon bouclier, mon gars.
No.
Guards were assigned to watch over him. Now he was under constant surveillance 24 hours a day. The days went
Oh. It's a therm. A therm. Yes, it's a thermite.
Aïe, le loup. T'as pogné l'homme araignée.
Seriously, for it. Claymore? Yes. Thermite stuff. Yeah, there you go. Oh.
Enfin, un roll doc, hein. Il essayait de pogner le doc, le gars.
with his daughter in Fukuoka Prefecture. Thereafter, traveled the country in search of work, mostly in the
C'est
construction
bon, je
industry.
l'ai.
He died of a heart attack in 1979 at the age of 72. Today, part of the prison is a museum dedicated to the history of this correctional facility and remains a display showing how Shiratori escaped back in 1944. An enduring memory of a man who could not be contained. Big thanks to our sponsor for this episode, Last Survival Down.
Protect the bomb.
Pourquoi le teco il est dans mon cou?
Be advised the bomb location.
Idiot.
Huh?
I called the pulse an idiot. Are they retarded me? I'm retarded.
10 seconds. 5 seconds to count. Op 4 has located a bomb. Be ready for hostile action.
Green Beret. The missing Russian hikers found dead. The Dyatlov Pass incident, 1959. Just to the east of the Ural Mountains, located on the east side of the city. This Sverdlovsk. In the local cemetery, a grave dating back to 1959. It contains the bodies of 9 members of the Ural Polytechnic. All died in mysterious circumstances while hitchhiking in the North Ural mountain range.
GG.
59 may have been at the height of the Cold War. Soviet citizen. This revolution so many great and glorious things, or so the Soviet press would have had you believe. For the Soviets,
Op 4, last operator standing.
first man-made objects.
If you remain in the zone, you will be detected by hostiles. You have been spotted by hostiles. Fall back. You have entered the controlled area. Leave now. You have been spotted.
Hitchhiking expedition. Highly experienced hikers and skiers, and the routine trip was made
Oh, by the way, yellow red.
You remain in this area. Your location has been compromised.
Wait, no. I think I'm thinking of the wrong dude. One dude kept calling me trash.
Op 4 eliminated. Mission successful.
After traveling north by train and lorry, the group set off from the village of Izai on January 27, 1959. As a safety precaution, Dyatlov told his local sports club that he expected to return to Izai by February 12th.
Oh, stream that is literally one of the worst human beings I've ever met.
Things started off well enough for the group.
Pretty grown man trash talking a 13-year-old.
The rest of the group, now 9 people, continued on with their hike. After this point, none of them were ever seen alive again. February 12th came and went, and the sports club received no telegram from Dyatlov.
How much more desperate or toxic can it be than that?
Over a few days. But by
I don't know
February
what I mean
20th,
by desperate.
relatives had become concerned, and the institute organized its own search team.
Secure the bomb.
Volunteer teachers and students. The Army and local police joined in, assisted by snowplows and helicopters.
Op 4 has located a bomb. Be ready for assault.
This meant in the local dialect,
Ooh, up, down, up, down. Where's the drone? I want to up, down. Where did God, Ella?
adjacent tracks, it seemed and rushed down the slope.
5 seconds left.
The group's tracks led to
Yeah, I don't really care.
a mile away.
Well, stream in the next couple minutes, I'm gonna be doing Cuphead Part 2. So be ready for that.